Naughty Dog. It's what I like to be called in the bedroom, and it also happens to be the name of the team who created one of my favourite series of video games, Crash Bandicoot. But I'm not going to be crapping on about that today. Naughty Dog has developed some other games. Looking at their history, you can see they've created a wide and varied range of different games, including The Last of Us, The Last of Us, The Last of Us, and The Last of Us. But one Naughty Dog series I've always been curious about is Jak and Daxter. It's a title that I've heard endless praise for. And by that I mean I heard someone at school bring it up once. But it's supposedly up there with the likes of Sly Cooper and Ratchet and Clank. I love Sly and Ratchet, so much so that I want to be in them. So it goes without saying that I should, in theory, love Jak and Daxter as well. But a theory is not a fact. A theory is a gateway to truth. And if burning different metals to see what colour the flame turns has taught me anything, it's that to prove or disprove a theory, you need to experiment. I need to play this series for myself to uncover the truth, and see if it's any good, starting with the first game, Jak and Daxter The Precursor Legacy. So, I've got my lab coat on, I'm wearing my protective goggles, and I'm ready to see what succulent gaming juices I can suck out of Jak and Daxter. The game begins with a tidal wave of information that I honestly struggle to even begin to comprehend, not because of a lack of intelligence, I'm very smart, but because there was a lot all at once. Some old man talking about precursors and monoliths and talking to plants and rocks that don't remember things, which isn't usually something that plants and rocks are able to do. It honestly sounded like a conversation you'd hear in a nursing home. "Oh yes, Janet, I asked the plants and rocks, but they didn't know anything about it. Maybe I'll ask again tomorrow." He carries on about this lazy, good-for-nothing boy called Jak, spelt incorrectly, who he for some reason believes is destined to uncover the secrets of the precursors, whatever that is. Instead of listening to this old sage, Jak and this SpongeBob-looking fucker head to Misty Island, a place they were told not to go. Typical kids, you tell them to brush their teeth, and they end up eating the newspaper. During their act of rebellion, they stumble across these two wizards, who command their soldiers to search for artifacts in Eco, whatever that is. Shortly afterwards, they encounter one of the soldiers, and during Jak's attempt to fight back, SpongeBob falls into this pit of this glowing dark sludge, which transforms him into a weasel and spits him back out. Now I get it, Daxter was actually cosplaying SpongeBob the whole time. Unhappy with his new form, Daxter demands the sage turn him back into SpongeBob, but the only person who knows how to do that is Gol, an expert on Dark Eco, whatever that is. Unfortunately for our heroes, no one has heard from Gol in ages. He lives far away, and all the other sages have had their teleporters shut down, so the only way for Daxter to be turned back into SpongeBob is to find Gol on foot, which would be impossible because they need to head through Fire Canyon, which, as the name implies, is way too hot for them to get through. Luckily, with impeccable timing, barely clothed woman shows up, conveniently with a solution. Her special zoomer, whatever that is, has heat shield capabilities, but to get it up and running, it requires enough power cells, whatever that is. And so, Jak and Daxter head out to collect some, kicking off the adventure. Jak and Daxter is a very straightforward game, and the first area of the game demonstrates how it works pretty effectively. Each area starts off with the duo exploring a hub world, usually a village. In this hub, they encounter eccentric NPCs who are willing to part with their power cells, either in exchange for some precursor orbs or by completing a task for them. These tasks are usually pretty basic and lighthearted, like herding yaks into a pen, or pushing an orphaned bird egg off of a cliff. But these NPCs don't have enough power cells between them to get you further into the game. Each area has a specific threshold of power cells needed to be allowed further in, so Jak and Daxter are going to need to up their numbers, and the only way to do this is to explore the surrounding levels. Jak and Daxter is a 3D platformer, following in the footsteps of many similar games by utilizing all three of the dimensions, including the lesser appreciated first dimension. You explore these 3D levels, completing platforming challenges and looking for collectibles. Throughout, you're looking for power cells and precursor orbs you can use to buy more power cells. On rare occasions, this involves participating in a minigame or piloting the zoomer, but most of the time you'll earn power cells by completing platforming challenges and sometimes even combat challenges. They're all fairly enjoyable. I can't think of a single one I didn't like partaking in. The objectives are straightforward, simple, and relatively fun. This all takes place in open environments that often include multiple paths and areas to explore. It's a tried and tested formula, and it works well here. I don't have any complaints about it. The game is focused with its objectives and doesn't get distracted with weird gimmicks. The levels are a good size, not so small that it's boring, but also not so big that it's overwhelming. The levels have decent layouts, they're relatively fun to navigate, they all have distinct themes. The game is ticking all the right boxes when it comes to its levels. There aren't any levels in this game that I dislike, which is impressive because I tend to like disliking things. Jak and Daxter's biggest unique feature, as far as I can work out, is eco. Throughout each level, the pair will come across different flavours of eco. The first and most important of these flavours is lime, as they keep Jak alive by restoring his health. The second one you will most likely encounter is blueberry, which charges Jak up, turning him into a precursor or magnet, and also allowing him to activate and interact with certain platforms and level elements. Strawberry flavour doesn't appear very often, but it is useful in that it boosts Jak's strength by quite a bit. Lemon has the most obvious effect, granting Jak the power to shoot projectiles, which is not just great for combat, but it's also used for completing certain objectives to earn power cells. Of all the flavours, lemon is definitely my favourite. And finally you have blackcurrant, which if you fall into it, turns you into a weasel. All these different flavours of eco change how you approach the challenges ahead, some a lot more than others. But they also don't hijack the game. The game isn't based solely around using eco. The eco only serves to improve Jak and Daxter's capabilities. Their natural abilities are the focus. That said, there isn't a whole lot to say about their natural abilities. Their innate moves are pretty standard. There's nothing wrong with them, they have a decent set of abilities, your typical jumping and double jumping, crouching, crawling, rolling, roll jumping, attacking, spin attacking, slam attacking. It's all pretty normal stuff. But when you compare it to the other sort of mascot platformers from around the same time, it does feel a bit lacking? Jak and Daxter don't have a wide selection of weapons like Ratchet, they aren't constantly learning new moves and abilities like Sly. What you have at the start of the game is exactly the same as what you'll have at the end. They never learn anything, they never improve or get better, they just stay the same throughout the whole game. That's not necessarily a bad thing, plenty of games do that, and Jak and Daxter have a decent set of moves, but it is a shame that they don't gain anything beyond using eco. It means that the levels can't get any more creative with their design, structure and objectives. They're limited to what Jak and Daxter are capable of without any sort of upgrades, and they don't make much of an effort to apply their limited abilities in new and interesting ways. And that does kind of suck. I was hoping for at least a little bit more than that. I don't mean to imply that Jak and Daxter are shitty playable characters, they're not. The only genuine issue I had with them was that they felt a little bit stiff, especially when it came to their jump, which in my opinion didn't have any decent height, hang time or mobility. It was like throwing a sack of potatoes up in the air and watching it fall back down. Just no half decent aerial movement at all. Beyond that, there's nothing inherently wrong with them. They just don't really impress me that much. Daxter doesn't even get involved. He doesn't actually do anything besides ride Jak. Surely Jak could have stretched him out and used him as a lasso or something. I also wasn't really impressed with them as actual characters. Daxter is definitely the star of the show. Even though his wisecracks and in-your-face attitude can be a bit much at times, he's at least expressive and interacts with the characters around him. Jak, on the other hand, has got to be one of the blandest, most boring protagonists I've ever seen. Super Saiyan hair aside, he doesn't have anything going for him. Look at all the other mascot platformers of this kind. Mario, a cheerful, friendly plumber, Sonic, a snarky, speedy hedgehog, Crash, a goofy, zany bandicoot, Sly Cooper, a smooth, suave, gentleman raccoon thief, Jak, a silent guy. He's just not an interesting character. He doesn't talk, he rarely expresses emotions or communicates with anyone. He's just there for Daxter to hitch a ride on, so he can do all the expressing and communicating. And when you combine all that with the fact that Jak doesn't have any powers or abilities that help him stand out from the crowd, you realize that he doesn't stand out from the crowd because he is the crowd. He's just generic. Even at the climax of the story, this doesn't change. Towards the end of the game, it's revealed that Gol and his mistress, Maya, plan to open silos of dark eco and use its power to destroy and recreate the world as they see fit. Throughout all of this, Daxter is carrying on about how the only person who can turn him back into SpongeBob is an evil maniac. He's terrified about facing them. He reluctantly swallows his cowardice and agrees to stop them. On top of all that, he's dropping in his little jokes and roasting the other characters where he can. Jak? Nothing. Beyond a few slight changes in facial expression and this goofy dance at the end, he has no presence as a character. Even Bubsy, as insufferable as he is, has a personality. I feel like I can't connect with Jak in any way. I can't appreciate what he brings to the table because he doesn't bring anything to the table. Daxter's doing all the work. If Jak spoke up, or just did anything, I would have enjoyed him a lot more as a character. But he's just a generic lump of nothing. And to be honest, the more I played the game, the more generic it felt. I don't think anything about this game is bad, far from it. A lot of it is decent at worst. But at the same time, it's nothing special. Nearly every aspect of this game feels generic. Nothing about it feels unique. There are so many things about it that are typical of these types of 3D platformers, not just related to the playable characters. Of course the story is based around the antagonist trying to harness a dark power. Of course the antagonist wants to destroy the world and rebuild it to their liking. Of course the final boss is a giant robot. Of course the protagonist is the only one capable of stopping it. Of course the protagonist has a wisecracking sidekick. Of course the protagonist has a female love interest shoehorned in at the end. Of course there are levels based on beaches, and jungles, and ruins, and swamps, and caves, and snowy mountains, and volcanoes, and factories, all with generic names. Of course the protagonist only has a basic set of moves. Of course there are the occasional vehicle levels. And of course the game ends with a dance. Again, there's nothing wrong with this game. It isn't a bad game. But I've seen it all before. There is nothing that Jak and Daxter does that I haven't already seen in a different game. It's like the developers set themselves the challenge of making a decent game without coming up with any original ideas. The most original thing about this game is that the human characters have massive ears. Beyond that, Jak and Daxter feels like just another run-of-the-mill 3D platformer. It isn't even that challenging. Even though I found the game to be generic in a lot of places, I did have fun playing through it, and I thought it was well presented. The locations were bright and colourful, they had plenty of landmarks, and they had some nice music. But that doesn't stop them from being generic. I want to emphasise again that I do not think this is a bad game. It was good enough and I enjoyed playing it. There is nothing wrong with it, it's a perfectly decent game. But when I look at what all the other mascot platformers were up to around the same time, it makes Jak and Daxter feel a little bit underwhelming. Stealth-focused platforming and heists, high adrenaline weapon play, experimenting with alternate perspectives on the story, basing the whole game on TV genres. Even games like Banjo-Tooie and Donkey Kong 64, which I loathe, stand out, because at least they tried to do something different. The best Jak and Daxter has is Eco, and even that doesn't make all that much of a difference. All these other games weren't afraid to take risks and try new things. They weren't afraid to experiment. They weren't afraid to think outside the box. Jak and Daxter could not be any more in the middle of the box if it tried. And this is why I'm struggling to see why it's praised so highly. Does it really deserve to be up there with the likes of Sly and Ratchet? To me, it feels more like Croc, where it's not bad, but it's definitely not better than its other platforming cousins. And I think that sums it all up pretty well. My theory is that because I love Sly Cooper and Ratchet and Clank, I should love Jak and Daxter. But while I didn't love it, I did like it. At no point during my Jak and Daxter experience did I think I was wasting my time. It was relatively fun and enjoyable, and there is nothing objectively bad about the game no matter which way you try and look at it. But I would be lying if I said I wasn't mildly disappointed. Jak and Daxter: The Precursor Legacy as a complete package feels very standard and generic. I feel like everything I experienced in the game, I could experience somewhere else in a different game, and it would probably be more interesting there. In terms of gameplay, story, and levels, it all felt generic. What the game needs is something to help it stand out. Give Jak and Daxter more unique abilities, maybe some that incorporate both of their skills rather than just having Jak do all the work. Maybe have a greater emphasis on eco, including more variants with more impactful and useful abilities. Perhaps a greater variety in the objectives for power cells, or some more creative level design and themes. There's a lot of room for improvement, and there's a lot of potential. It just needs to be realized. And hey, this is the beginning of a series. Maybe in the sequel, things do get better. Things might become more individual and unique. Things might start to feel special. It might elevate Jak and Daxter in a way that makes them worthy of sharing the stage with Sly and Ratchet. But as my experience with it currently stands, Jak and Daxter is decent, but generic, and I'm crossing my fingers that things will get a lot better. Anyway, if you'll excuse me, I'm gonna head back into my bedroom. I've been a very naughty dog.